Welcome. This episode, we are going to be talking all about what is going on this Virgo season. So, we've just entered Virgo season today, and we are going to be talking about how the energy is going to be shifting from Leo season to Virgo season, and also throughout this Virgo season. So, we'll be exploring the themes of this season and also the planetary movements of this season. I feel like I've already said season so much that it's like not a word anymore. But anyway, this episode is going to be more integrated than previous episodes. But one thing we have to look forward to is more retrogrades. So we are really moving into the thick of retrograde season this Virgo season. So I don't know if look forward to is the right word, but there's definite pros and cons to being in the thick of retrograde season, and we will definitely explore that in this episode. So we are now in Virgo season. Now, Virgo is the sixth sign in the zodiac. It's an earth sign, it's a mutable sign. So when we talk about earth, the immediate words, keywords, themes that should come to mind are things like grounded energy, slow energy, stable energy. Earth is all about productivity. It's about work. It's about the earth, like our connection to the earth. It's about focus. It's about organization. It's about being goal oriented and kind of like, what do I need to do to get to where I want to be? So moving from Leo season, fire, into this earth season, it feels like, okay, we've had our fun. We've had a crazy Leo season. Now we need to come back internally. We need to come back to ourselves. We need to come back to stabilizing our roots and taking care of ourselves in a way that we might have neglected to do so over the past month. So let's kind of go through. I know I go through this in like every episode, but I really want to track the kind of journey that we take through the seasons. So from Aries to Taurus, we were inspired by something, we had an idea, we had the motivation, and then we were like, okay, cool, let's build it, let's plan it, let's get the foundations, let's execute. Then moving on to Gemini season, we start to express this, we start to share this. We're like, I'm creating this new thing, I want to share it with you, I want to share it with the world. Then we go into Cancer season, we retreated back into our own energy, right? We were connecting with our own intuition again. We were taking care of ourselves. We were focusing on family, on our home. Then into Leo season, how do I then step back into self-expression? How do I double down on what I'm passionate about? How do I express more of my authenticity? And now that we're moving into Leo season, now that we're moving into Virgo season, this is all about how do I adapt to the changes that I've experienced? Everything that I've experienced, whether it's over the past month, over the past few months, how can I integrate that into my routine, into my habits? How do I build better habits? How can I work on my physical health? How can I do the details? How can I organize my life better to have stability in this next phase of life that I'm building and I want to align with? One phrase that comes to mind is like trimming the fat, right? Like you're cutting off what is not necessary. You're cutting off what is no longer useful. So that's kind of the evolution of energy that we go through, on a yearly basis, right? It's the kind of planetary movements during each season that makes each season or every year a little bit different. And that's what brings the events that we go through and experience each year. So if we look at Virgo as a sign, Virgo is ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is all about the mind. It's about analysis. It's about thinking, right? It's about shifting and being adaptable, being mercurial. So it's a very quick energy, even though we are talking about Earth, which is slower, it's more grounded, it's more like step by step. So you kind of have the best of both in a way. Now, I want to focus, I don't think I've done this before, but I really want to focus on the symbol for Virgo. So if you Google it, you'll see that it's like an M, the letter M, and then it's got a tail that kind of curves inwards. So it's actually very similar to Scorpio's symbol, but Scorpio, the tail of the M is curving outwards. So with the tail of the M in the Virgo symbol curving in, I think of this as like the tail that stings inwards, because Virgos are very hard on themselves. Like it's always, if something goes on or something goes wrong, their first instinct is kind of like to reflect and be like, that means there's something wrong with me, or that means I didn't do it well enough, or that means I'm not good enough, right? They have this inner critic that's always there. They have this need to be perfect or to seek perfectionism, which I guess is our kind of first big theme. So this analytical nature, you might find that, excuse me, during this season, you become a lot more, it's a lot more of a mental kind of season, whereas Leo was very feeling, it was very about expressing and expressing more so in like an energetic sense. This is very much like mental mind, right? So with this analytical nature, you might find that over the next month, you become a bit more nitpicky, right? You might find, especially when it comes to yourself, that the track of that inner critic or the words of judgment that you have for yourself, they become louder or a little bit louder. So every little thing, it's like, oh, why am I not doing good enough? Or why am I always like this? Like, if that's happening to you over the next month, just be aware that that is an energetic imprint, is that the right word? Of Virgo. Now, with judgment, with this critical internal dialogue that happens, Virgo wants to seek the truth. Like, that is what they want to do. The perfectionism is because they can see the truth of things. But if we mix the truth with our stories, our limiting beliefs, our conditioning, that's what makes it easy or easier to turn it into a critical internal track for us, right? This season is very much a practice in identifying our inner critic, identifying our inner voice, identifying what are the stories that are still impacting me, what are the limiting beliefs or the fears or the wounds that I'm still believing, and that this inner critic is still operating from, that this inner critic is still judging myself from. So this is especially important as for the first week of Virgo season, we are still in Mercury retrograde. Like, we're in Mercury retrograde right now. So there is this need to slow down, to learn, okay, what is my actual perception of this? What is my judgment of this versus what is the truth of the matter? And we need to remember to keep an open heart to the truth, but not twisting that through the lens of our own wounding. So yes, it is important to be like, wow, okay, I did not do the best job at whatever task, but that's not anything to do with me, right? Like, I can always improve. It might be a skill thing, it might be a time thing, it might be an energy thing, it might be all these different factors and all these different variables. But it has nothing to do with my worth. Like, just because I wasn't perfect at this doesn't mean anything about who I am as a person. And it's necessary to be able to still be truthful, but not turn that into criticism or judgment. When it comes to perfection as well, there's this almost compulsion to strive for that perfection because we can see the potential of it, we can see the vision of it. So everything that we do that doesn't come close to it, that then turns into criticism, right? It's like, I know that I could have done this up to 100%, but I only had the capacity for 80%. And so I didn't do that 20%, and that's when all our stories and stuff comes through. So again, really, really important to just be aware of when that inner critic starts saying things, when it starts criticizing you, when it starts judging you, and being able to separate that and practicing the art of separating that from truth, right? Separating that as just one voice. That's just the critical voice. That's not the voice of my mind, of who I am. So along these lines as well, this season is really important to give yourself permission to not be perfect. Give yourself permission to focus more on the process, not just to rush through it so you can get to the end goal. And I know that's very much like eye roll, like so cheesy, but this season really is about seeing the truth of things, seeing the good, seeing the bad, seeing the ugly, the whole truth of who you are, where you're at, what your life is like right now, and not just seeing where it's not perfect yet, right? Because if you really think about it, perfectionism is an illusion. Like, if we reach perfect, then what? Like, where do we go from there? There's no more movement, there's no more development because we're already at that perfect level, right? And it's almost like the duality of things. If we can't see or we can't envision or we can't imagine what perfect is, then we can't see the flaws of, or the perceived flaws of what's going on right now with our life or with our work or with our relationships or just with ourselves, right? And so that's along the same lines of like, okay, we need to remind ourselves that perfection is an illusion. It's an end goal, but our life keeps on going. Like, as humans, we keep evolving. There, we are never going to reach perfect because by the time we do, there's going to be a new quote unquote perfect goal for us to reach, right? So that also reminds me, a few months ago and also earlier this week, actually, in my membership calls that we have each month, we were talking about something similar, like the idea of perfection when it comes to what our calling is or what our purpose is, and feeling like we're all trying to just find that one thing. Like, if I can just find what my purpose is, if I can just pinpoint what I'm here to do, like that would make things so much easier for me. And so in those calls, like, we really spent time, especially the one that was specifically dedicated to purpose, which was a few months ago, I think. We really spent time breaking down and rewiring a lot of those limiting beliefs so that the idea of finding our purpose, instead of it feeling like stressful and limiting, like, why do I still not have it? Why have I still not figured it out? It feels a lot more open and exciting and adaptable. So it was such a potent call. Like, it was such a good call. And the kind of healing that we can do around our perception of our purpose is really timeless. So the replay for those calls are all up inside my membership space, and I will pop a link to that in the episode notes or the episode description, wherever you are listening to this. Okay, coming back to Virgo season, especially the element of Earth. So Earth is all about doing. It's the act of, acting, I guess, taking action towards our goals, right? It is working towards our goals. It is being of service, and service is a key word when it comes to Virgo in particular. And typically Earth traits or Earth energy, a lot of people are just like, oh, it's so boring. It's like the mundane things that we have to do. It's like the chores, it's the responsibilities that we have. And yes, I can see why that is boring, but it's also so crucial, because if we don't do them, our life does not, like, it cannot continue, like, if we just let the dishes pile up in the sink, what are we going to eat with, right? If we don't do our laundry, our clothes are going to stink and we don't have any new clothes to wear. If we don't pay our bills, we have nowhere to live. We have no electricity. We have no gas, whatever, right? So it's like, yes, it can seem boring and mundane, but it's these small things, it's these perceived boring things that keep our life moving. So coming back to service, Virgos at their best have an insanely high evolution if they are of service to themselves, if they prioritize themselves. Because when they are in service, and instead of prioritizing themselves, instead of doing it consciously, if it's happening out of their subconscious stories or their wounding, which is, like, this is not to shame anyone. You guys know that that is not what happens. in my space at all, but we do speak to the truth of what can happen, right? So a lot of the times as we're growing up, we are very much operating out of our wounding, out of our stories, out of our trauma. And so when Virgo does this, out of those traumas, out of those woundings, a lot of the time they are simply in service to others and doing things for others and putting others' needs as their priority. So there could be a few different reasons for this. It could be from being able to see the perfect solution. And why can't anyone else see that? Never mind, I will just do it for you because I can see it. I can see exactly what needs to happen. And it seems like you're stuck, so I'll do it for you, right? It could come from an inner sense of not being good enough themselves. And so it can be this feeling of like, well, I know this is how I feel. I don't want anyone else to feel like that. So let me do things for you. Let me fix this for you. Or it could be like, if I can help people fix their stuff, if I can help people, that means I'm worthy. That means I'm not worthless, right? They almost like find their worth through the problems they can solve for other people. It could be wanting to make their loved ones' lives easier, right? Let me do that. I can do that. I can handle that. I done it before. Let me do that again. It could be that they really are able to see details that no one else pays attention to. And it can be this kind of feeling of like, oh, no one else can do it as well as I can. Let me just do it myself. Right? So there often is this element of people pleasing that can happen here. And people pleasing as a theme actually will be exaggerated, especially in the first 2 weeks of September. So what is happening planetarily, energetically, is that we have Saturn opposing the sun. So we have the sun moving through Virgo and we have Saturn opposite that in Pisces. And this aspect or this placement is a major sign or brings up a major theme of people pleasing. So if you have this in your birth chart, you can listen to this next part. This will apply to you on a personal level. Everyone else, if you don't have this, this is just going to be something that you are moving through that can bring up these themes for you. So when we have this placement, we want to do things that others approve of and will validate us around or for, right? So if you have wounding here around people pleasing, so you might not have this exact placement, but you might have other placements that feed into people pleasing, or you might have just been conditioned in a way where you have a pattern of people pleasing. So if you do have wounds around this, which I myself do, this is a good opportunity for them to kind of come to the surface and for us to keep healing these wounds and keep prioritizing ourselves and keep holding our boundaries or whatever wounding you might have there. Now, the good thing is during this time, we also have Mercury trining Chiron. So this is a very supportive aspect that allows us to clearly think about what is going on, clearly analyze what's going on, clearly think about our wounds, our fears. We might have really potent conversations around these wounds and these fears and these themes around this time. And it's just really supportive for us to realize and what's the right word? Like, it's Mercury retrograde right now, by the way. Like, I've been having trouble with my words all week. It's crazy. So this aspect really just helps us to gain more insights that can help us on our healing journey. So even though, yes, we might be experiencing the discomfort of people pushing our boundaries, let's just say, this aspect, this supportive aspect, is there to be like, hold on, like I can catch that happening. I see exactly what's happening. I can analyze why this is triggering me, what that trigger is, and how do I then kind of move through it and process it and heal that, right? So pros and cons, good and bad. Now, coming back to service, so just putting transits aside for a second, Virgos really need to be of service to themselves first. Like, that's a crucial lesson that is going to be emphasized, especially during those 2 weeks, but just during the entire Virgo season. Like, I always think of it as, you know how when you're flying and they're going through the safety checks and they're like, if the oxygen masks drop, make sure you put yours on before helping others. That's kind of the philosophy here, or the idea here. Like, if you're not able to put your own oxygen mask first, how can you help others, right? If you're helping others, but you don't have your own oxygen mask on, like you're going to pass out. You're not going to be able to be in a position to be able to help others. So this way, putting your own oxygen mask on first, prioritizing yourself, this is how you are going to be able to actually embody your best. Whether that is, I need to work on my physical health, I need to work on my diet, I need to work on my nutrition, I need to work on bettering my well-being, whatever that might be, because those themes are very tied in with Virgo, right? Like that is the core of this season. Like, yes, I can see all the things of what other people need to fix or what I can fix for other people, but let's turn that internally, especially because we are in retrograde season 2. Internally, what's that reflecting about me? Am I doing those things that I want to help other people with? Right? And also just when Virgos can do that, they're actually hilarious. Like they're some of my favorite people. They are so hilarious. They're so snarky. They're so witty when they are at their best, when they're actually putting themselves first and feeling good about themselves and feeling good within themselves. Otherwise, they can tend to be a bit like talk the talk, but not walk the talk. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure that's like the right phrasing. But anyway, when you are in service, right, it's also important that you're not just doing things to stay busy, but you're actually taking intentional action. Because with the energy of just mutable signs in general, there is a little bit of this electric kind of scattered energy here. So there can be a little bit of anxiety when you think about, I have so much to do. I have so much that I haven't done. There is so many tasks left. It can feel like I'm putting more things on my to-do list than actually taking them off. So it's important that we're not helping out of compulsion. We're not helping out of not being able to stop ourselves from fixing other people. And fixing here really is a key word. Like we really need to remember to be kind to ourselves and to others. We need to remember to accept our differences, our quirks with kindness. Like, again, coming back to perfectionism, we are never going to be perfect. We're human, but our perceived flaws, our perceived faults, where we are not quote unquote perfect, that is actually part of what makes us whole. If we just pick out the parts we perceive as perfect, we're not going to be whole. We're not going to have the entire human experience, the experiences that we've gone through, the way that we feel, the kind of parody that we are, not parody, paradox. See, I'm like messing up with my words. The paradox that we are inherently as human beings, right? Like we are a duality. We are both light and dark. We're not just one or the other. We can't say, oh, only one is perfect, right? Like we are perfect in our imperfectness. And again, I know I roll cheesy, but that really is a big theme this season. Now, in terms of like practical things you can do, I feel like we kind of talked about them, like having that Mercury Chiron trine, being able to have conversations. Journaling is going to be really good as well. But alone time is going to be super important this season. Reconnecting with your inner truth, allowing your system to come back within, just to draw your attention and your energy from other people back into yourself, almost like a magnet, like where you've put little bits of your attention, bringing them back into you, right? Reflecting on the details of your life, especially around your health and well-being. Reflecting on the habits that you have, because it's these small habits that stack up to create the life that you're currently living. So if you're unhappy with a part of your life, what are the small things that you might not notice that are actually building and stacking on top of each other to create this thing that you're unhappy with, right? How can we adjust them to be more in alignment with the life that we want to live, with the person we want to be? So this earth energy of working, of producing, of organizing, and most importantly, how we are doing all of those things is really being put on blast this season. So I want to move into more just specific transits that are really emphasizing this earth energy. We have Pluto making its final retrograde back into Capricorn, as well as Uranus beginning to retrograde in Taurus. So both of those are earth signs. We're in Virgo season, so we essentially have the trifecta of earth signs all happening, all at work. So firstly, with these retrogrades, our 4 outermost planets are all going to be retrograding until mid-October when Pluto stations direct. So I'm just going to skip ahead just a little bit, but essentially in around early mid-October, we are going to have a window of a couple of days when Jupiter also begins retrograding, and that brings half our planets in retrograde. Like, we have 10 planets that we work with. All 5 of our outer ones are going to be retrograding together for a couple of days. And that's huge because not only is that half our planets, but the sun and the moon never retrograde. So really, when we are talking about retrogrades, only 8 of our planets can retrograde. And right now we have 4. So really out of the, well, not right now, but by the beginning of September, we're going to have 4. So by that time, half the planets that can retrograde are going to be in retrograde. And these are all of our 5 outer planets. So outer planets are more societal, they are more collective, they're much more generational. So this time of resting, pausing, slowing down, reflecting, moving backwards is happening on a large collective scale. And moving backwards is like a perception of moving backwards or stagnating, right? So firstly, let's talk about Pluto, because Pluto has been retrograding since early May. So it's been a few months. At the start of September, it moves back into Capricorn for the final time before it goes into Aquarius again and stays there for good. So if you've listened to any kind of astrology podcasts or any kind of astrology posts on social media, you probably have seen all this talk about Pluto moving into Aquarius over the last couple of years. So it's been going, because it moves so slowly, it kind of goes like back and forth between the 2 signs for a while. So this is the final time it is going to be re-entering Capricorn and then moving out of Capricorn. So this is like a final revisit of these Capricorn themes, structures, foundations, right? On a societal level. And with Pluto being involved, this brings power into the mix. So we might be seeing more things being revealed about how power has been used by authorities, by governments, by these like huge world structures that we base our society on. And more than likely, it's going to be a misuse of power, right? So we are also being asked to reflect on where do our ambitions lie, and also opening our eyes to where the ambitions of our world systems lie. So again, Pluto brings up hidden truths, it brings up secrets. So during this time, just paying really close attention to what is happening on a collective level, what is being revealed, especially in terms of these like structures, like governments, authorities, banks, all of this. Now it can feel a little bit unsafe energetically because, again, we're working with Earth, we are working with foundations and structures and systems, right? And these are the systems that have created our sense of stability, our sense of this is how things are in the world. But we have to think of it this way. Pluto is destructive as much as it is creative. And with the creation of something new, we have to have destruction of the old, destruction of what was in the past, destruction of the things that can no longer move with us into the future that we want to build. So that's kind of a little spiel on Pluto going back into Capricorn. Then we have Uranus retrograding in Taurus. So again, this will kind of rock our sense of safety, especially in regards to themes surrounding Taurus, like stability, finances, personal values, beauty. They all come to the surface for us to revisit and to turn inwards to reflect on. It might be helpful, actually, if you want to re-listen to the Taurus season podcast episode, because obviously we go much deeper into Taurian themes there. So yeah, that can be an option for you. But basically, Uranus speaks to our sense of personal freedom. It's authenticity. It's our stubborn will to go after what we want, even if no one else gets it, even if we are the only ones walking along this path, right? When we have a vision, we're like, that is what I want to go for. Nothing can stop me. I might face bumps on the way. I might feel lonely along the way. I might be alone on this journey, but I know that this is what I want. So this retrograde, which as well will go on for a couple of months, really use this time to reflect on and refine how you want to approach the next chapter of your life. How do you want your journey towards deeper authenticity to be like? How are you aligning with your core values? How have they changed? How have they shifted? How are you going to shift your actions to match that? So we've got these retrogrades going on. So again, very much a time to slow down, to not act impulsively. I say this with every retrograde, like you have to keep living life. Life keeps moving along, life keeps going. It's not a time to just completely stop and be a hermit and just hide away for months, because that's not sustainable. Like, we can't do that. But it is a time when we can slow down. We can be much more aware and alert and conscious of what we're doing, our actions that we're taking, and especially during Virgo season, the details of what we're doing that regularly we might gloss over or we might not really pay attention to. Okay, moving on to our final kind of transit, we are also moving into eclipse season. Yay! Not really, but also yes. So early in September, we have a Virgo new moon. That's on an eclipse. But the next full moon, around mid-late September, that will be a lunar eclipse. Then the next new moon, which we are going to have in Libra season, that will be a solar eclipse. So we are moving into eclipse season with the next full moon. Now, eclipse season is always intense. There are things that happen during eclipse season that cause a kind of domino effect. And whatever happens during eclipse season, there is a big sense of finality of like, wow, that just happened. There is no going back. Like, this is now the path forward. There's no way for me to go back to that path now. So the energy of eclipse season starts to build around 3 or 4 weeks beforehand. So really right now, you might be already starting to feel the rumblings of something final, something big happening, right? So just, again, keeping your eyes and ears open to what is going on in my life, what's going on in the people around me, in their life, what's going on, with whatever's adjacent to me, seeing what's coming up, what themes are coming up, what patterns are coming up. So with this eclipse in Virgo season happening in the sign of Pisces, because we're in a full moon, this speaks to patterns of escapism that you might be asked to face. This might be any spiritual or subconscious or emotional blocks that are holding you back from healing or growing. You might also find that the certain illusions of what you thought was the truth start to break down. And all of that is so that you can see your own deeper truth more clearly, so that you can sink into your inner world more. And as always, with every new and full moon, I have a free moon newsletter that you can sign up for, which I will link in the show notes again. And I also have specific guidance inside my membership, which the women there get. And that is for the house that these new moons and full moons fall into in your chart. So I write guidance and I guess horoscopes depending on the house, because that for me has just always been more true. That really specifies what area of life it's really impacting for you. So that is an option if you want to check out my membership space. You also get a monthly overview of the energies, the most optimal days for certain things, and weekly and daily forecasts to help with planning and navigating your life through these energies that are constantly changing and cycling. So that is essentially what is going on this Virgo season. I feel like I say this every episode, but I'm really looking forward to an intense next season, to what's coming up, even though we are going to be going through some challenging energies. It's all things that are building and creating the momentum that we need to make the changes for our highest good and society's highest good. So if you have enjoyed this episode and this podcast, please leave a rating and drop a review if you feel called to. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next